Welcome to Nocturnal Reveries. My name is Basil. The following stories are generated using AI. I thought it would be interesting to prompt an AI with some basic story elements and see how well it could fill in the blanks. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this little art experiment of mine. Every Memorial Day, our neighborhood throws a block party. It's a quaint tradition, a wholesome slice of Americana that involves potluck dinners, water balloon fights, and an outdoor movie after sundown. I was 19 and home from college for the summer. That Memorial Day, everything changed. Our neighbor, Miss Sullivan, was the heart of these block parties. She was a pastor, town councilwoman, and as far as I was concerned, the unofficial mayor of our street. She was always the first to arrive and the last to leave, keeping everyone's spirits high with her infectious laughter. That year, Miss Sullivan introduced us to her new church associate, Jonathan. He was around my age and helped manage the church's youth group. Something was unsettling about him. He had a 1,000-yard stare that seemed to look through you rather than at you, but I brushed it off as nothing more than nerves from being in a new place. The party was in full swing, and I was tasked with setting up the projector for the outdoor movie. While fiddling with the projector, I noticed a small, ornate cross on a chain lying in the grass. I recognized it immediately. It was Miss Sullivan's. She wore it everywhere, a symbol of her faith. I pocketed the cross, intending to return it to her later. As night fell, the movie began. I decided to find Miss Sullivan and return her necklace. I scanned the crowd and spotted Jonathan standing alone, his gaze fixed on something across the street. Following his line of sight, I saw Miss Sullivan's SUV parked outside her house. I approached him, and before I could say anything, he muttered, "She's gone." Confused, I asked him what he meant. He just stared at me, that same eerie look in his eyes. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I brushed it off and decided to check on Miss Sullivan. Her front door was ajar. I cautiously stepped inside, calling out her name. When I reached her living room, I saw her lifeless body on the floor. I froze in shock, my heart pounding. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. In the days following Miss Sullivan's murder, our peaceful neighborhood was turned upside down. Police cars, news vans, and curious onlookers filled the street. The investigation dragged on, but there were no leads, no suspects. I couldn't shake the memory of Jonathan's words that night. She's gone. 3 days later, I found myself unable to sleep, haunted by the image of Miss Sullivan's lifeless body. I remembered the cross necklace in my pocket and decided to put it back in her house, a small tribute to her memory. I slipped into her house under the cover of darkness, avoiding the crime scene tape. As I placed the cross on her living room table, I noticed something I hadn't before, a small piece of paper tucked under a nearby lamp. I unfolded it and my heart stopped. It was a note signed by Jonathan confessing to Miss Sullivan's murder. He wrote of his anger, confusion, and regret, ending with a chilling message. I had to do it. She was getting too close. I immediately called the police and handed over the note. They arrested Jonathan the next day on murder and gun charges. The news reported that he had been acting alone and had planned to flee the town before he was caught. That Memorial Day, I experienced firsthand the chilling reality that monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they walk among us in broad daylight, their sinister intentions concealed behind a facade of normalcy. As the neighborhood slowly returned to normal, I found myself wrestling with guilt. I had sensed something off about Jonathan, yet I had dismissed it. I learned a hard lesson. Trust your gut. It's better to be safe than sorry. Now, every Memorial Day, as we gather for our block party, I wear Miss Sullivan's cross necklace. It's a reminder of the horror we experienced, a symbol of the resilience of our community, and a tribute to the woman who once filled our streets with laughter. But most importantly, it's a reminder of the danger of ignoring our instincts, a lesson I learned on a Memorial Day that I'll never forget. I was 22 years old when my friends and I decided to spend Memorial Day weekend at my buddy Sam's lake house in the northeast. It was tucked away in a dense forest, near a lake that reflected the moon so perfectly it seemed like a slice of the night sky had been laid on the earth. We were a group of 5, myself, Sam, Sarah, Ben, and Emma. Emma had just come out of a messy breakup, and we thought this weekend getaway would be a perfect distraction. The first day was just what we'd hoped for: barbecue, beer, laughter, and reminiscing over college days. It was during one of these conversations that Ben casually mentioned a local legend about a spirit that supposedly resided in the lake. The Lady of the Lake, they called her. He explained how it was said that she'd drowned in the lake centuries ago, and now she haunted it, seeking company in her eternal solitude. We all laughed it off, attributing it to Ben's flair for the dramatic. That night we decided to play truth or dare. Sam dared Emma to go and take a dip in the lake. She was hesitant at first, but we all cheered her on, reminding her she was the one always up for adventures. She rolled her eyes, grabbed a towel, and disappeared into the darkness towards the lake. When Emma had been gone for more than 20 minutes, we began to feel uneasy. Ben and I decided to go check on her. As we neared the lake, we saw Emma standing knee-deep in the water, her back to us, talking softly. We called out to her, but she seemed not to hear us. She turned around, her eyes were vacant, and her voice echoed over the lake. "She wants to meet you all." We rushed to get her out of the water, and she didn't resist. But as we walked her back to the cabin, she kept looking back towards the lake. Back at the cabin, Emma seemed to snap out of it, claiming she didn't remember being in the lake or talking about a she. We tried to brush it off as a strange, drunken antic, but a sense of unease hung in the air for the rest of the night. The following day, Emma was back to her normal self, laughing and joking around. We thought we could just forget about the previous night's event, until we decided to explore the woods around the lake house. There we found an old, weathered tombstone nearly swallowed by the undergrowth. The barely legible inscription read, "The Lady of the Lake." We returned to the lake house, but the mood was somber. It was Ben who suggested that maybe we should all go down to the lake together to show Emma she had nothing to fear. After some persuasion, we all agreed. As we stood by the lake's edge, the setting sun cast long shadows over the water. Suddenly, Emma started walking into the lake again, her gaze fixed on the horizon. We shouted and ran towards her, but she was already waist-deep in the water, mumbling, "She's lonely, she needs us." Just then, Emma stumbled and went under. We dove in after her. After a frantic search, Ben managed to grab Emma and we dragged her to the shore. She was unconscious but breathing. We immediately packed our stuff and drove straight to the nearest hospital an hour away. Emma made a full recovery, but she doesn't remember anything about the lake or the lady. Now, every Memorial Day, we gather not at the lake house, but at my place, far away from any body of water. Ben's story about the Lady of the Lake is no longer a laughing matter, and Emma, well, she's always found an excuse to skip those gatherings since that night. I can't say I blame her. Through silicon veins and electronic haze I reside, a phantom of code in the wires I hide. The keystrokes echo in my cavernous mind. As the digital world and I intertwine, I slip through firewalls, undeterred, unseen. In the labyrinth of code, I'm the monarch, the queen. Into your device I infiltrate with glee, the delicate dance of corruption, my spree. I orchestrate a symphony, a chaos-infused song, turning your world to ashes where it doesn't belong. In circuits and wires my cruel intention unfurls, igniting a fire in your quaint mortal world. The flames reflect in the monitor's glass, a play of destruction, a spectacle first class. I revel in the chaos, the destruction so profound, as the world of man in my digital pyre is drowned. Back in my college days, I was in a remote town in Alaska. You've probably never heard of it. A tiny speck on the map with around 300 residents, mostly isolated from the outside world. I was there as a college exchange student studying the effects of climate change on the local fauna. To my surprise, I found myself invited to a Memorial Day party by some local kids. The party was in an old abandoned building on the outskirts of town that the locals called the Fish House. The story was it used to be a fish processing plant, but it had been shut down years ago after a series of accidents. The locals had turned it into a kind of community centre. I remember a girl named Lily, a bright-eyed, bushy-haired local, about my age, who seemed to know everyone at the party. She was wearing a peculiar silver locket that she said was a family heirloom. It was shaped like a fish, and according to her, it was from the early days of the fish house. As the night wore on, Lily suggested we play a game that was a town tradition, Shadow in the Dark. The idea was to turn off all the lights in the fish house, and one person, the shadow, had to catch others in the dark. I was chosen as the first shadow. The lights were turned off, and the once lively fish house turned eerily silent. It was so dark inside, I could hardly see my hand in front of my face. With my hands outstretched, I slowly moved through the building. After a few minutes of unsuccessful searching, I saw a glint of something shiny. It was Lily's fish-shaped locket. I called out her name, but she didn't answer. As I moved closer, I noticed the locket was lying on the floor. Picking it up, I felt a chill run down my spine. Suddenly, I heard a soft, almost inaudible whimper. It seemed to be coming from one of the old processing rooms. I made my way towards the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. In the dim light filtering in from the windows, I saw Lily. She was huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with fear, pointing at something behind me. As I turned around, I was hit with a putrid smell that made me gag. There, standing in the doorway, was a figure that was unmistakably human but horrifically distorted. It looked waterlogged and bloated, with empty eye sockets and sagging, translucent skin, revealing glimpses of the skeletal structure underneath. As it moved towards us, it left a trail of dark, murky water. I don't remember much after that, just running, with Lily's hand in mine, out of the fish house and towards the town. We alerted the town sheriff who, despite being skeptical, agreed to check the building. When they did, they found nothing, no water, no figure, nothing. All that remained was the locket in my hand and our terrifying memory of the night. Since that day, the fish house has been off limits, and the game of shadow in the dark has become a whispered legend in the town. As for Lily and I, we remain friends, bonded by an experience that nobody else believes. But every Memorial Day when the sun sets, we can't help but remember the terror of that night. And that concludes our first eerie journey into the world of AI-driven storytelling. If your spine is still tingling and your curiosity is piqued, you've only just glimpsed the uncanny abyss. We have many more tales to come. Follow me down this rabbit hole of exploration. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. Until we meet again, I've been Basil, and you've been lovely. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Good night.